Mama, I got bad news, bad news. I've been rolling with some bad dudes, bad dudes. I've been trying to get a bag too.
Hello, listeners. Welcome to the Ashes to Awesome podcast, Rising in Recovery. Our podcast provides light, hope, and understanding about addiction and mental health to those living within that life and the people who love them. This episode is brought to you by Together We Can, where Canada recovers from addiction. That's twcrecoverylife.org. Hey guys, so it's been 2 days since I recorded this episode. I've been trying to edit it, and we had some tech issues wherein one of our guests, Rich Johnston from Rosecrest Recovery Services down in the United States, we had some feed issues with him, and I've had to edit out everything that he contributed to this episode, which is really unfortunate because he had some great things to say, and I'll get him in for another episode sometime in the near future. He was in episode 131. If you go back and take a listen to that. He had some great insights to offer this conversation, but unfortunately, it just wouldn't work. So I've had to edit the episode in such a way as to kind of remove everything that he had contributed, even though we had little patches. So if there's some things that don't make sense, that's why. And I thought it was important to just let you guys know that right off. Barring those issues, and of course having to edit Rich's contributions out, I think it was a great episode. So please go ahead and listen. Just keep in mind that if there's anything that sounds a little bit awkward, that's why I did my very best to make it seamless. But I'm only human. So thanks for listening, guys. Enjoy the show. Hello, listeners. Welcome to another edition of the Weekend Ramble on the Ashes to Awesome podcast. I'm your host, Chuck LaFlange, and today I am joined by the largest panel we've had so far. First up is my friend, my co-host, person with lived experience, and well, he's still kind of a role model to myself, Karl the Athiest. How you doing today, Karl?
Doing great, Chuck.
Good stuff. My other co-host, Lisa, she's a psychiatrist who fought addiction alongside her brother for more than 2 decades, brings with her a unique point of view to her profession and lived experience combination. So how you doing today, Lisa?
I'm great, Chuck. It's nice to see you guys.
Hey, likewise. And to finish off today's panel, a returning guest from episode 123, a man with a hell of a story that's made more compelling by his ability to tell a great story, and as host of the live video podcast, Knox Talks, someone I have been taking notes from since I started. Welcome, Daniel Unmanageable. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me, you guys. Nice to meet everyone here. I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Yeah. So yesterday, I came across a reel that Dan had put out, which he tends to do a lot of. He's really good at it too, about addiction and whether or not, and maybe I'll let you describe it, Dan, lest I bastardize it or something. Where that conversation was, and I'll let you launch it off there.
Well, the reel, and thanks, Chuck. The reel sort of touched on 2 points. One was language, the language around how we identify as people who have used substances. And the second part of it was whether we maintain that status throughout the rest of our lives. Like, are we talking about, am I always going to be an addict?
Mm-hmm.
When I first came into recovery, that's pretty much how I introduced myself to everyone. In the grocery store, I'm Dan, I'm an addict. and I don't know how far into it you want to get, but that was what the reel is about.
Yep. Well, I think that certainly speaks to it the way what I was looking for. Right off the bat with that, what I'll say, especially in early recovery, and here's a lesson that I've learned, right? Not everybody needs to know that, in my opinion, right? And if you could go back, I don't know whether or not you'd have changed the way you did things. For me personally, I know there was, for instance, an apartment that I wanted to get. And when I said I was an addict in recovery and I had a podcast, immediately things changed, right? And you could just see the shift in the conversation, all of it just kind of stopped right there. And I didn't get the apartment at the time. I really needed it too. So it's pretty frustrating. And there was other times too where I would have changed that. Yourself, if you could go back down?
No, I don't think so. I think I'd keep it how it was. And that's funny because the other day I was having a conversation on the same podcast that I pulled that reel from about going back and what would you say to your younger self? And like none of us really had a solid answer. And it was another panel conversation. And it's like, I wouldn't be who I am today if I didn't have the experiences that I've had. And I did have similar experiences to the one you just described, except I didn't say necessarily that I was an addict in recovery, but I was on social assistance
Yeah,
you know, at the time.
which is,
and,
there's as much stigma there as there is to.
and I am 100% sure that I told the person that I was in recovery, but
yeah, right. So,
I don't remember the conversation, but yeah, no, I get it. And you know, I'm glad I had that experience. Wasn't meant to be, and here I am today. So no, I don't think I'd change it.
Okay. Karl, you never really did the whole "I'm an addict" thing the way that I did anyway. I don't think, right? You just kind of, you know, moved on with your life and
there's
whatever.
been situations where I've told people that I'm an addict, and the one time that I can think of was at a party, and somebody pulled out some blow, and they're like, "Hey, you want to do a rail?" It's like, no, I can't do a rail. I'm a fucking addict, right?
Yeah.
And you know, just the shock of him hearing that was, he was like, "Oh my God," right? Like, I'm so sorry. And it's like, well,
just
you don't
kill
have
the
to
whole
be
buzz
sorry.
in the whole room.
Yeah, it did, right? But,
Great,
you know,
Karl. Great. Right?
Yeah, thanks. I'll just throw this out the window now, I guess.
Yeah, it went to a great conversation though, right? Because you know, instead of him going to do his coke, you know, he wanted to talk more about it, right? He asked me about crack, and you know, like, or what drugs I was on, and I was like, you know, I did coke, I did crack, I did meth, and he's like, yeah, I don't understand, like, the big deal about crack, like why did you do it? And I said, well, it's fucking great, right? Like, all these people aren't doing crack all the time because it sucks, right? Like, they're doing it because it's amazing, and that's the problem, right? Like, it puts you into that place where you forget everything, you know, bad, or, you know, anything, all your traumas,
good,
and that, you know, puts you into that moment, right? So I have told you know, maybe a half dozen people in the, like, 22 years that I've been clean or whatever, but yeah, it's not something that I really say. But there was a guest that you have on, and I was racking my brain trying to remember who it was, but they introduced themselves as a survivor of addiction, and
Scotty H from Vancouver.
Yeah, that was it. And I really liked the way that he said that. And I'm going to use that from now on, I think.
I did too. I did really like that, actually, and that's something that I definitely wanted to touch on later in the episode. Lisa, of course, you've never suffered an addiction, but being the Muggle, as you know, I fondly refer to you as, right?
I love Harry Potter, so it's all good. Yeah.
And I think I know your answer only because of your own lived experience, and you know, and of course your professional experience as well. But if you hear somebody say it, if I say that to you, does it change your perspective of in how you deal with that person, or, you know?
For me, it probably elicits more compassion for you than if than if you weren't.
Fair enough, right?
But I think, like, I appreciate hearing all the different views. I think for me, as an outsider, I totally appreciate that there's still, unfortunately, so much stigma in society against addiction that I can see, Chuck, like how you described, you know, you missed out on an apartment. You know, if you were to go up and say to a potential landlord, hey, look, like, I'm battling cancer right now. I'm in a really hard place. Like, I'm going through chemotherapy, blah, blah, blah. I actually think you would have been more likely to get the apartment because they'd be like, oh my gosh, like, let me help you. And sadly, I think addiction is still very much the opposite. I can totally appreciate that you're probably not the only person who's lost an apartment because you were honest. And so I think it's great to kind of own your struggles and be proud of, you know, especially if you're a survivor, to say, like, you know, this is what I've been through and I've survived it and I've come out the other side. But I can also very much appreciate people who choose to sometimes tell that story and sometimes to keep that to themselves. So
of course. I love the way you bring that into it, that you know, if it was cancer, and you've done that before in a couple episodes before, Lisa, and I really do appreciate that. It really does reframe the entire conversation when you put it that way, right? So I'll let somebody jump in on this part now. So can you recover from addiction? That's a big question, and I think that's something that, well, it's you instigated it, Dan. So maybe we'll go back to you again to start on that one. Do you have a thought on, like, an opinion on that, or are you still open to, or where are you at with that?
You know, it's, will I ever completely heal from the traumas I endured during my active use? I mean, I can't say that for sure. No. Will I learn to work with them in a more productive way? Will I learn to frame them differently in my mind and see them differently and use them differently? I suspect. But not unlike the reel that instigated all of this, it's like, I don't want to be who I was before all of this happened. You know, I was somebody who was trying to escape something that was unknown to me at the time. I didn't know, and frankly, to this day, I don't really know what it is. I know that what it is still exists inside of me. I have different experiences and memories attached to whatever it is, but it still manifests. You know, like before all of the addiction, it was this one thing that I didn't have in my life that would just drive me mental. I needed to have this to be okay. Right. And then I found drugs and it gave me that. Yeah. Now the drugs are gone. I still have that. Like I still have that, but I'm at a point now where I'm trying to decide, is this addiction or is this the human condition? Do I just need to find, like, we all want to feel better. Yeah. Like we all have this desire to feel better, to feel good, to feel accepted. That's not an addiction thing. That's a human thing. Yeah. You know? So am I always going to be in recovery? I think I'll always be healing from different things. But it's like, I think my life has moved into a place more of discovery. I've never seen any of this stuff before. Right. You know, I've never had thoughts like I'm having now. I've never had motivation. I've never had feelings. I've never had understanding like I've had before. Yeah. So is this recovery? I would argue that this is more discovery. That's that rhymes. It goes. Ooh, I see a good meme coming on. There's a song in there somewhere. Let me just grab my guitar. When we look back, if you want to talk about AA literature, there like the first edition of the big book. And I don't know when they changed the intro or whatever, but it says we've helped over 100 men and women recover from the hopeless disease of alcoholism. I don't remember the exact words, but they definitely lead you to think like you can recover from this. And that leads me to think that there is a state of being recovered. Yes. So honestly, I don't know what else to call it. Like, I really don't. Like when I'm in front of an audience like this, I say I'm in recovery because I don't know what else to say. You know, like we don't want to use language that's going to throw up barriers. We don't want people to be like, what do you mean? You know, like when we're having a conversation like this, it's, you know, well, maybe not like this, but I think you know what I mean. It's sort of like one of those know your audience type things.
Karl, your thoughts? Are you always going to be an addict?
I like how Dan said he's in a discovery phase because
I really like
actually
that.
Something that popped up when I was watching that reel was instead of recovery, maybe it's more of a rediscovery. Mm-hmm. You know, you thought you knew who you were, but now you're figuring it out. You know, with a clean head.
I never claimed I've ever known who I am. Just for the record.
I'm in the same boat. But yeah, I mean, definitely. And I'll say like people that are healing from addiction, we'll say that instead of recovering. How about that? People that are healing from substance abuse or addiction, you know, there's always that little part. There's always a trigger. You know, 3 years ago, my wife's birthday. And we were at the bar and everybody was having a good time. We were having some drinks and it just popped into my mind like, man, you know, a rail would be great right now. And that's like 18 years after I'd ever touched anything. And then all of a sudden, you know, that just popped into my brain. Like where the hell did that come from?
Probably would be great. Like the first one.
Yeah, exactly. Until like 6 weeks later when I'm selling my truck for a dime bag. But yeah,
so did you vocalize that or did you keep that internal?
Well, I didn't speak about it then, but I did bring it up, you know, in the next couple of days because I needed to get it out of me, right? Yeah. Because you know what happens is you know, a normal brain will go, here's a problem, here's how you fix it. Sometimes with addiction, your brain says, here's the problem. And then it goes around the circle and it comes back and it's like, this is still a problem. And then you get mad and then it goes around that circle and you're like, this is still a problem. And now you're feeling shame. And then it goes around that circle again. And now, you know, it just keeps going around that circle and there's never any actual resolve. It's just you contemplating the problem and you know, basically letting that problem take power over you. So I always try and find the resolution.
Once you get it out of the body, right? Yeah. That's interesting. From a professional standpoint, Lisa, Can you speak to that? Is addiction? I mean, I know you believe strongly that addiction is a disease. So, can you ever be recovered from that disease?
So yeah, from a scientific perspective, to me, it's a chronic illness, right? And the reason I say that is if you look at, there's various organizations that define what a chronic illness means, but essentially they all have like similarities in that it's something that evolves over time, it's something that's progressive, and it's something that requires ongoing treatment or tending to. And so from that perspective, if you take somebody who's had serious addiction and you ask yourself or you ask them, I don't want to ask myself because I don't know, but if I were to ask somebody who's got this history of serious addiction, say they were addicted to heroin, can you go out and use heroin for a weekend and then stop? Or do you think that that would lead to ongoing recurrent use of heroin again? Most people I've asked that question to would tell me that, no, I can't go out and use heroin for a weekend. I've asked people that question. I've asked my brother that question. Like, I think that for most people who've suffered in serious addiction, they can't go out and use for a weekend and then just walk away, which to me tells me that it requires some form of ongoing tending to, whether that's by, working their sobriety, attending a program, avoiding use in whatever means they want. But so I do think it satisfies, the definition of a chronic illness. And so from that perspective, but I still think like recovering, I don't know if I think it really matters. Like if you've been sober a certain period of time and you feel that you're in a recovered state, so be it. But I guess the way I would verbalize something like that would be that you're currently in a recovered state from a chronic illness that you have, being the illness of addiction.
It's in remission. If we're gonna
exactly. Right. I still am like, I don't like the I'm an addict terminology or so-and-so is an addict. I don't like that. Never have, never will. I don't think anything will ever change my mind on that. And again, it's, as Chuck's heard me say before, it's like you go back to that, definition of other illnesses. Like if you had cancer, would you walk around and tell people I'm cancer? No, you wouldn't. No. You would say I'm a human being who is currently suffering from or dealing with or battling cancer. And so I feel like it's almost shaming to me. We've been hearing lots about guilt and shame, but when you start to identify as your disease, I think that comes with a blanket of shame. So, to me, it's a human being who has an addiction. Not I am an addict. So I don't want nurses going around being like, hey, the guy in P2 is an addict. No way. Like that, I totally appreciate though, that again, to say addict equals shame, it shouldn't be. Like it should not be that way.
So I know, Lisa, my language on the show has changed. And I don't know if you've heard me say addict since the day you said that on the show. Right.
Yeah,
and
everything
has changed. The intro has changed. Everything has changed. The outro with suffering and addiction. It's somebody who has suffered an addiction. Sometimes it's a mouthful and I go, fuck it, just easier to say addict, but right.
Yeah. And that's the thing.
Yeah, right.
That is another thing. This I
loved your little thing, Dan, in that reel. I loved it. Kind of,
yeah. But it's serious because like there's another there's an organization here in Canada called CAPSA. Community Association of the acronym's evading me, but anyways, one of the things that they're very anti-stigma, they're very language first person oriented. That's not an addict, that's a person living well with substance use disorder. So but the convenience of being able to say I'm an addict, that's like done, like that's just very efficient. So in certain circles, like I will still say that because, I want to honor the space and everything. But yeah, like I'm still struggling with that. And like, even like that conversation I had with CAPSA, that was like 2 years ago. And still to this day, I still like, how do I identify like in a room full of people? How do I get that message across that is not stigmatic, that does not put a negative connotation on my presence, and like, even, in my first 3 years, that's who I was. I was Dan the Addict. Like that was it. And I would go to 2 meetings every day. I would thump that big book. I would do all the things, like I know a lot about the program. I'm very well versed in it. And I'm grateful that I have that knowledge and experience. But now it's come to a place where it brought me to a place where I'm so immersed in the community. Like when I go out in public, like I don't want to wear a shirt that says sober across it. You know, I don't want to wear a shirt that's just like tells the world that I'm this person, that I'm a person in recovery and healing. I just want to be Dan.
Right.
You know?
Right. And which is, so Ryan spoke to that, the prison of recovery, I believe he referred to it as, where, yeah, you can absolutely, you can be trapped in that. And does it prevent you from growing? Because that's who you are. Now, I can argue, Dan, you are where you are in your life, in your recovery journey. And, you're doing well now because of that time you spent identifying.
I don't regret that time. That wasn't like, I'm not looking back saying I wish I didn't do that.
No. I didn't mean to infer that. There's some power in that, in owning it the way that you did. But yeah, did you get the right to graduate past it? Right. And to just being that all the time. And hey, I'm still early recovery myself. Right. So maybe I'm not the right person to answer that. Though that said, I don't want to run around identifying as an addict anymore. I just don't. Right. I mean, I'm 46 years old, and I've kind of passed that point in my life. So
I feel like I'm no longer battling addiction as much as I am, maybe battling is the wrong word, but trying to understand the human condition.
Okay.
Like I'm no longer really trying to understand why I did drugs as much as I am trying to understand why I feel the way that I feel. Drugs aren't really part of the equation anymore. I have no desire to use. When thoughts get dark, for me, my thoughts do not go to drugs, but they go to places that are not healthy. So actually on Tuesday, I'm going on a psilocybin ceremony journey. I'm doing it. Doing it. Yes.
Very cool.
Yes. I'm 6.5 years into my recovery, and I'm doing it.
Wow. So, and that's your episode coming up this Sunday, and you can do some shameless plug right now. I'm really interested in that, because you're poking the bear of a pretty big community there.
Yeah. Like, I don't really feel like I'm poking the bear, and 3 years ago or 4 years ago, I would have been like, I am definitely poking the bear right now.
Okay.
Because like I was inside that bubble, inside that community where this is how you recover. These are the things that you do. These are the steps that you take. And if you do these things and you stay in this safe little place, you'll be okay. Right.
Yeah.
When COVID hit and I started doing this podcast, my eyes were opened. There is a big, giant world out here outside of that community, and I'm not detracting from the importance of that community. That community helped me immensely. I might even say some days that it saved my life. However, there are so many different modalities out here. There are so many people out here. It's just like a great, big, huge, wide world. So I definitely don't feel like I'm poking the bear when I'm talking about psychedelics and bringing a person on who has had experience with psychedelics. And in fact, he is now a professional in that field. He helps other people through the power of psychedelics. And I think that's amazing. Yeah. And if people think I'm poking the bear, they can come and tell me. They can call their sponsor. See, and that's the thing, like going to dark places. Like I'm not packing up my glow sticks and my candy bracelets and going on a, like it's not like that. So, but like, it's like, I kind of hope that I find some of those dark places. Like that's why I'm going. Cause like my life is filled with abundance. Like I love my life. Like I'm not rich, like, I definitely like sunk a lot of resources into the studio that's around me here. And, but what I'm saying is like, the lens that I look at my world now is built on trauma. When I polish this lens, and I think Ryan Bathgate talked about it. We look at the future through the lens of the past. Yeah.
That's very much a Ryan thing to say.
Yeah. And that resonated with me, and that helped me make sense of a thought I was already having. I don't know how to take that lens down, and through all the work that I've done, through all of the conversations that I've had, maybe not unlike this one today, there's something there. There is something there that I can't put my finger on it. So whatever comes, like I hope to learn from it. Nor has mine been in the past.
Oh, wow.
Did it work?
No. Actually, yeah, okay. So next point then. Actually, you know what? Let's take a quick break. Hey guys, well, I got my denture in from dentkits.com, and I got to tell you, for the first time in 3 years, I'm looking in the mirror, and I'm not reliving the trauma. I'm not feeling terrible about myself. I like my smile. It's so awesome. Anyway, hey, they are way less expensive than traditional dentures. No matter what your situation is, whether you're missing one tooth or a whole mouthful, dentkits.com has an affordable solution for you. Check them out, guys. I am so proud to be an ambassador for this product. Now that I have my smile fixed, you can look forward to some video episodes of Ash's Straws. Thanks for listening. Now, back to the show. And Karl, speak to this one first and see where it goes. Do you have to be 100% abstinent? And I know that's going to be different for everybody, but as a general, Karl, for you, how does that look?
Well, for me, I abstain from cocaine, crack, and meth. I do
Heroin's
still
on the
smoke.
Board, right? No, I'm just kidding.
anything that involves a needle, other than like a tattoo,
Yeah.
it's like I have a hard time with needles. So I'd be hard pressed to stick a needle in my arm to get high.
Mhm.
But I still smoke marijuana. You know, I smoke my fair share. Probably smoke your fair share too. You know, I smoke cigarettes, and I drink occasionally too, right? Like those are my you know, big three, and occasionally I microdose with mushrooms.
Okay. So
you know, probably not in the last 2-3 months. I mean, they're in my fridge. I just, you know, it's you got to be in the mood. You got to be safe. You got to be with safe people, and when I say microdose, I mean like I'm taking like 0.15 of a gram of.
Oh Jesus, we did that on the way to get high, right?
Exactly. Like if I look back at like, geez, I can remember eating. You know, we get an ounce and split it between 2 people, right? Just chow those down, like, you know, the High River Classic Rock Weekend.
I remember it well. Yeah.
Stressed out up at the stage.
Well might be a strong word, but I remember. I remember it happened.
Yeah, but like I'm constantly aware that what I'm doing and why I'm doing it, right? Like I'm not doing it. I'm not doing it to hide from anything. I'm doing it more as a social thing, and some people can't do that. There's some people that need to completely abstain from everything, you know, to get their addiction under control.
I think we can say addiction. I don't think that, like, you know, like that's not a bad word.
Don't want to start saying the A word. But some people can, some people can't. There's times where you know, I'll go, you know, a week or two without touching anything, right? Except for obviously cigarettes and caffeine. But then there's times where I'm just like, you know what? I want to relax a bit. I'm going to go sit outside and, you know, lay in the sun and just have a puff.
Dan, well, obviously you're not an abstinence hardliner now, right?
Well, I mean, I don't know, man. Like, no, I'm not an abstinence hardliner. In my own personal life, abstinence definitely works for me. Like, I don't, you know, like that. That's what I've done. Will I always be like that? I don't know. You know, what I have learned in my recovery is absolutes are dangerous. You know, black and white thinking is dangerous. To assume that I will be the way that I am in 10 years is silly. I everything might change tomorrow. I might be I might hear something today and change everything, you know? So, but I will say that the first 6.5 years since I've stopped using substances, I haven't turned back to them. And as a result, my life is quite a bit better. Maybe I do need to chill out and smoke a joint once in a while. I don't know. But like, you know, things went sideways enough for me that I'm very, very apprehensive to think that way. Right. You know, a beer does sound great. on a, you know, sometimes I do have that, like, oh, I wonder if I could just go and have a drink, you know. It's just not, at this point in my life, it's just not worth that risk, you know, like for that momentary or whatever couple hours of relief I'll get from that. What may come after is certainly not worth the risk for me right now.
And I think the fact that you use the word relief kind of says, you know, speaks to it right there, right? If that's, like Karl said, if that's what you're looking for, maybe that's not the thing to do, right? I know for myself, weed and alcohol were never a problem, like really never a problem. I never, and I'm almost positive I could, but I'm like, why?
Yeah, like why? Yeah, right? You know, like that's.
I just spent 40 fucking years high or 30 years high. I'm
jump back in.
Yeah.
Like when I first stopped, I didn't do anything. Like I didn't smoke pot. I didn't drink. I've been. It was 2001 was the last time I used any hard drug. But it was probably 2006, 2007 before I had a beer again. Or smoked
I wanted to ask you about that. Thank you for bringing that up.
It wasn't just, okay, I'm going to quit Coke. I'll just put all my efforts into marijuana now. It was, I stopped everything. You know, I cut off all those people in my life that were using still because it was just too much of a temptation. So, you know, like don't take a page out of my book and just think, oh, well, you know, I've been clean for, you know, 2 years. I'm going to go buy a bag of weed or stop off at the dispensary. You know, make sure that, you know, you're healthy enough to make the right decision and that you have the support around you and somebody, you know, like my wife, who's going to, you know, she doesn't hold back. Like, if I've had too much to drink, she's going to tell me, you know, hey, that's your last beer. She's not going to say, maybe you shouldn't have another beer. She's like, that's your last beer. Right. So, you know, take what I'm saying with a grain of salt, you know, and do what's best for you. Just like we say, like when you're in recovery, you know, use the program that works for you. If 12 step isn't working for you, find something that does.
But I just did that interview with Mike Loughlin. No, he says the Irish pronouncement is Loughlin. So yes, you corrected me before that interview. Anyway, smart recovery. And Dan, you're probably more up on it. Lisa, you might even know more about. I've heard smart recovery mentioned a bunch of times, but I literally just heard about like in any sort of detail the other day for the first time. And as opposed to the 12 step, not as opposed to 12 step, maybe, you know.
Alongside the 12-step program.
Alongside the 12-step. I thought it was really interesting, and I think I need to get some more people that are you know, smart recovery advocates to come on the show because it's something I definitely want to.
They're tough to find. I'm not gonna lie. You know,
really,
like I've often wondered what the inner workings of that are, and I have had a couple people come on and talk a little bit about it, but I still don't really have a very deep understanding as to how it's differentiated from the 12-step program. Okay.
Yeah, it's not faith-based. I know that's kind of the kickoff there.
You know, that is a good question for Lisa. Lisa, you work with people who struggle with substance use, correct? Like that's a safe assumption. Yeah. Do you ever come to a place where you mention to them perhaps abstinence is not the best for you?
So it's interesting because obviously the people that I'm working with are acutely unwell. They're not people who've been in sobriety for a decade or whatever, right? I would say for most of the folks that I'm working with, it's either, you know, recommendations are either abstinence or harm reduction, right? There are people who just their whole life is not supportive of abstinence in that they're homeless, they have no support system, but they're unwilling to go to residential treatment. And so we know when they leave the hospital that they're going to go back and live, you know, at a shelter of some kind where there's drugs all around them. For people like that, it's great for me to tell them abstinence, but the reality is abstinence is going to be really difficult for somebody like that. And so that's where, you know, I do think there's a place for harm reduction because if we can have them started on, you know, Suboxone or methadone in the hospital and minimize or alleviate cravings, and then they're able to leave the hospital and live in an environment where drugs are around them, but not crave and hence not go back to using IV heroin or smoking fentanyl, then obviously that's better. But I think outside of that, if it's somebody who has a support system, who wants to go to treatment, who's got a means, whether to go to private treatment, then early on, I would definitely recommend abstinence. I think for me, the worry with using substances at some point in the future, whether they're legal or illegal substances, is just the lowering of inhibition. And, and that, there's nothing wrong with smoking a joint, but are you somebody who's going to smoke a joint or have one beer, and because you feel less inhibited, you're increasing the risk that you will then go on to doing things you don't start out intending to do?
Which I think that's going to be the concern for anybody. Myself, if I did have a concern, like I said earlier, I think I could smoke a joint, or I think I could have a beer. But then, well, fuck, right? What if those inhibitions came down a little bit, and it led to some other, maladaptive behavior, right? So, yeah. You said harm reduction, Lisa, and which brings me to my next question now, which wasn't a question until just now, but Suboxone and methadone. One of the things I have, questions I have all the time, or concerns I have with the abstinence hardliners is that, and correct me if I'm wrong, because I have not spent a lot of time in the rooms, that's not viewed as sobriety. Is that fair to say?
I think this narrative's changing.
Okay.
The old guard is very much, abstinence is the only way. If you're on methadone, you're not sober. If you're on Suboxone, you're not clean. It's there's definitely that mentality. But I am finding, and like with the community that I'm building on social media and in the community here in Saskatoon, like we have a harm reduction organization here in Saskatoon called Prairie Harm Reduction, and they are internationally known. Like they are very well known for their advocacy efforts, and they have a safe consumption site here that is completely privately funded. It's funded by community. It's funded by donation and fundraisers and things like that. And it's they have a mass spectrometer. Like they can test your drugs. You can go there and they'll test your drugs. And the woman that runs that, and I have her blessing to share this, she's a 12-stepper.
Yeah. Really? Eh?
So yeah.
Well, that's a bridge between the two schools of thought then, if nothing else, right?
And there's more than one community-based organization here in Saskatoon that advocate very strongly for harm reduction strategies that are run by people who have been in the anonymous fellowships.
So now for a quick PSA brought to you by Revolution Recovery, helping men recover and become their best selves through support and treatment. They've been there and they understand.
Hey everyone, this is Ryan Bathgate from Kaleidoscope Wednesdays. I wanted to bring a public service announcement to you today about Narcan, or also known as naloxone. These kits have saved so many lives over the years. I can attest for that. Being in the industry for so long, I can tell you since we've had the opioid crisis declared in 2016, it has saved thousands of lives, and I've watched it personally save hundreds of lives. These kits are small, easy to use. You can keep them in your glove box or in a cupboard in your home, and you never know when somebody's going to need them. If you have a hard time finding a Narcan kit in your area, just email us here at ashestowasomepodcast@gmail.com. Throw Narcan in the subject line, tell us where you are, and we'll do the legwork to find that for you. If you wanted to send me a question for my Kaleidoscope Wednesdays, again, email ashestowasomepodcast@gmail.com. We will read that question on air, and I'll do my best to answer it in a comprehensive way. That's all I have for now. We'll go back to the show. Thanks for listening.
Fellowships.
So, and I know, Lisa, you had spoken to this some time ago, and correct me if I'm wrong, please. There was, you moved to being in favor of harm reduction from being a hardliner against it at one point. Is that correct?
Yeah. So, I mean, it far predates any education in this, was long before medical school or anything. But when my brother was first in recovery, I was I believed abstinence was the only way. And I think it was, that people who were helping my brother in his first residential addiction treatment program, they were in their 50s, 20 years sober. They were strong supporters of AA, NA, full abstinence. And so I just kind of took that on. It was like, well, that's the answer.
Okay.
And I think part of that for me was like, I wanted there to be an answer, right? I needed there to be an answer for how my brother was going to get better. I didn't like there to be gray zones. I wanted it to be concrete, and I wanted to know what the answer was. And then it was in medical school working in an opiate program and seeing people who were on methadone, had been on methadone for over a decade. They were working full time, they were functioning, they were married, they were raising children. That I started to go, okay, like, wait a minute. For some people, methadone has helped keep these people sober. And you looked at patients' histories where pre-methadone, they were relapse, and suddenly they were on opiate agonist therapy and they were functioning. And that's when I started to go, okay, like, this is not black and white. And it just changed my perspective.
As education often does, right? Yeah, some experience. So that's interesting.
If you look at research on opiate agonist therapy, now granted the stuff that I have looked at, and this was a few years ago, so it may look a little bit different today, but I did at one point, I attended an addiction journal club, and that was kind of what it was about, was opiate agonist therapy. And the papers we read were predominantly people who, were not 19. So I agree. At 19, I'm like, lifelong methadone, don't know that I would jump to that either. But looking at people who had like very severe, and by severe, not just, the drug they're using, the modality of the use, but also the duration of their addiction, what it actually showed was that if you took people like that who were stable on, say, methadone, even 5-10 years out, if you took them off their opiate agonist therapy, there was a very high relapse rate. So again, it's sort of interesting. Like, I feel like if I had somebody who had suffered in, heroin addiction for 20 years, was on methadone, functioning, married, working, raising kids, would I tell them to come off it? I don't know that I would. Like, if it's not causing you a problem and life's going well for you, if they wanted to, I'd support it. But would I recommend that just for the sake of getting them off methadone? I probably wouldn't.
It's part of the thing that people like to focus on about the fellowships. And again, in my very early days, the rooms were everything, right? Like everything. They were a big deal. So, and it's just, and I didn't move away from them with intent. It just kind of happened that way with circumstance. But the desire, that's what it says, correct? The desire to stop using, right? And so this kind of discrimination, you can't be here if you're on methadone, or I don't know if that actually happens, or if that's an excuse people like to make to not go. There's always an excuse, the best one. Well, I'm not religious. Well, all right.
And why are you saying the Lord's Prayer at the end of the meeting? I'm going to jump down that rabbit hole. I don't want to.
Yeah. I just, there's always people make excuses not to go, right? Yeah. And I think we're always going to find one if, right? So I was guilty of that for a short while myself. Kind of my last days there.
I never went to any meetings because of that. Exactly what you're saying. Like, I don't, once you start rambling on about religion and God, and I shut off, but that's me. If that helps you, great. But to say, well, religion isn't part of this, but then every third paragraph is mentioning religion, it shuts me down personally.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Yeah.
And it chases me away from that, and trying to find something that is going to work for you. I had to look within my support group and find things that would help me. Just the way my brain works. I'm very logical. I'm very linear, and it's a real big deterrent for people. I mean, that's why I go by Karl the Athiest, right? It's, you don't have to be religious to be sober. You don't have to. You don't have to believe in God. You don't have to say the Lord's Prayer. What you need to do is look inside yourself and see where you want to be and who you want to be, and try and achieve that through support through your friends, family, and if you don't have that,
whatever works for you,
find some counseling or whatever works for you.
I want to be careful about moving people away from the anonymous program. So, and I that's not really where I wanted this to go, though I kind of took it there. So, we'll get back to kind of get to the last segment here about identifying as an addict. And I think, Dan, you said it really well in your reel, but sometimes it's just easier. But will you forever identify as, or something like Scotty said in that episode, I'm a survivor of addiction. And I think personally, so far, that's my favorite term that I've heard anyway. I'm a survivor of addiction. It might seem a little dramatic to somebody that hasn't lived it, but to me, it seems like a pretty accurate way to put things, right? So, yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I frankly, I don't know how to identify these days. Like I've definitely, I'm trying to move away from that. If I'm out in public and people ask me about my past, I'm a survivor of addiction is definitely something that I couldn't get behind. So, maybe I'll have to think about that, but yeah, I'll say, I struggled with substances and now I'm not. So
yeah.
Right.
Like, why do we even need the labels? Right? Why can't it just be Daniel Unmanageable?
Lisa, when people ask me,
Chuck.
When I get engaged in the conversation, are you clean or if you're on Suboxone or not? I'm like, who fucking cares?
Yeah, right.
Really?
Good point. It's that said, to somebody who is new to sobriety, new to recovery, and it's just occurring to me now as when I'm in detox and I'm in my first NA meeting, and somebody with their shit together stands up and says, "Hey, I'm an addict." Right? That was pretty goddamn helpful at the time.
Yeah.
Like that meant a lot at the time because, hey, look, this guy's an addict. I'm an addict. Wow, he's got his shit together. So there is something to be said for that, right? In that circumstance, right? And for people that are new to recovery, being able to identify with somebody that says they're an addict, I think there's a lot of power in that. Right?
It's impactful and it really gets their attention right off the hop. Right.
Yeah.
Like you can use all the safe, cozy PC words you want about, I'm living my life sober because I struggled from, but like Dan said in the reel, right? Like it rolls off the tongue. I'm an addict. The end, right? I don't have to get into all the nuances of it. It gets your point across to the muggle because generally it's the muggle that you're telling. So yeah, it's impactful. It gets your point across, rolls off the tongue. There's certain situations where you use it, and maybe there's certain situations where you're going to lighten it up.
Well, I think unless anybody else has something that they really want to add, I think we can, get towards our daily gratitudes, if everyone's okay with that. So that brings me to my favorite part of the show. That's daily gratitudes. Maybe I'll just... Today's Daily Gratitudes are brought to you by
Yacha Treatment Centers in Phuket, Thailand. They are a clinic run by clinicians, not a business run by businessmen. And they know that where addiction is the smoke, trauma is the fire. Learn more at yatracenters.com. That's yatracentre.com.
Maybe I'll just go for a gratitude from each of you, starting with Karl. What do you got?
My wife.
Yeah.
Casper.
Yeah.
Super grateful. Love of my life. Best friend.
Aw.
That's all.
I like
Chuck's
that.
like, I thought I was your best friend.
She's way better looking than I am. Yeah. You have to tell her I said hi, Karl. Dan, how about yourself? What do you got for gratitude?
I'm grateful for my family. I didn't, when I was in my addiction, I didn't realize how valuable family was and how meaningful it was to be a part of a family. And today, I still don't think I have a full understanding of how valuable and how great it is, but I definitely have a clearer understanding, and I'm so grateful to be a father. I'm so grateful to be a partner. I'm so grateful to be a son and a brother. I think that's what I got.
That's awesome.
Can I interrupt the gratitudes for 1 second? Just because this is the first time I've met Dan, and we are on video. Can I see the tattoo of the bear?
Oh, that's right too. Huggy, what's it?
Puppy.
That's awesome.
Oh,
that's awesome.
Yeah, it's puppy.
I was trying to picture it in my head. But thank you.
That's awesome.
Sorry, Chuck, go ahead.
No, if you're going to interrupt it, that's a great thing to interrupt the gratitudes for. Lisa, what do you got?
if I've got one, it'll be the same one every time. Well, as long as it can be. I am grateful that my brother is sober today. I feel like I've got my brother back. I get text messages. I get to communicate with him. I get to talk to him about me and my life. You know, it's for a long time I felt like I was an only child, which I was not happy about. So I am grateful that my brother is sober.
Wow. Yes. Yeah. And for the final gratitude, it is to you, the listeners. Whatever you guys are doing, please keep doing it. If you are listening on Spotify, you can now watch on Spotify as well. Of course, you can watch on YouTube if you're listening on any other platform. And drop some comments in on the Spotify, some ratings and reviews on Apple. We do appreciate it. And every time you do any one of these things, you're getting me a little bit closer to living my best life. My best life is to make a humble living, spreading the message. The message is this. If you are in active addiction right now, today could be the day. Today could be the day that you start that lifelong journey. Reach out to a friend, reach out to a family member, call into detox, go to a meeting, do whatever the hell it is you need to do, because it is so much better than the alternative. And if you are the loved one of somebody who is suffering an addiction, you're just taking the time to listen to our conversation. If you could just take one more minute out of your day and text that person, let them know they're loved. Use the words,
"You are loved."
That little glimmer of hope just might be the thing that brings them back.
I'm the monster with a mono to drugs and frustration. Created this isolation that others find selfish. Had to cope with some shit that could kill, hit the all switch. Had to do a mind shit to get through the time stretch. Seems like bad days last and the good days fly quick. This monster in my thoughts taunts me till I'm sick. Takes over reality. Can you feel the insanity? Body shaking like my thoughts are causing allergies. Truth and fiction can't seem to tell the difference. Anyone out there relate to me? My only one tripping. Left wishing I could be the normal one in the room. Anxiety got me twitching, feel a monster in the distance. Gotta get busy, can't let this shit affect me. When no one left to protect, who's gonna protect me? Feels like shit's getting messy. Now that the monster's taking over, I think it's the only one that gets me. Yeah. Met the monster in my storm. Did I let him stay too long? Cause he don't wanna leave till everybody's gone. Pushed away the ones that I need. It's messed up cause inside it's not who I wanna be. Think one thing and do another. React to the emotion that wants me to suffer. Sorry if I smother. I suffocate my relationship like we undercover. Wanna disconnect and run from the suburbs. The old me wants to return. Wants me to forget what I learned. Had nowhere to turn with all the bridges burned. Pain is what I know. Heart's hard as stone. Feel the shakes in my bones. I'm turning cold. Look at what I did. You had my back from the beginning, but I couldn't see it. I was blinded by my feelings. Selfish. I guess me and the monster have a lot in common. Look in the mirror, see the reflection of the problem. Yeah. I'm the monster with a mono to drugs and frustration. Created this isolation that others find selfish. Had to cope with some shit that could kill, hit the all switch. Had to do a mind shit to get through the time stretch. Seems like bad days last and the good days fly quick. This monster in my thoughts taunts me till I'm sick. Takes over reality. Can you feel the insanity? Body shaking like my thoughts are causing allergies. Truth and fiction can't seem to tell the difference. Anyone decide to rob him? Am I the one trying to drag us to the bottom? When I get suspicious, is it all in my noggin? I guess this monster is morphed into my core. Spent so much time alone, thought I was talking to the walls. Locked in a prison, being haunted by my thoughts. Gotta break out and take out the monster like a boss, yeah.